Welcome to Personal Injury Marketing Minute.
Welcome to the Personal Injury Marketing Minute, where we quickly cover the hot topics in the legal marketing world. I'm your host, Lindsey Busfield, the Vice President and Partner over at Optimize My Firm. In today's Spotlight on PILMMA series episode, we are joined by Eric Morgan, the President of Roux Advertising. Eric has more than 30 years of experience in media strategy, planning, and buying across a wide range of industries, of course, including legal, but also healthcare and consumer brands. Eric is going to be speaking at PILMMA this year as a part of our Spotlight on PILMMA series, and we are so excited to have you here, Eric. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for inviting me for this. This is great. As you said, Eric Morgan, I'm president of Roux Advertising. We are I guess this year we're 29 years as an ad agency. We're based in New Orleans, and we have a couple of different divisions. We do a lot of work in the legal space, legal marketing space. We also do a lot of work in healthcare. We have a healthcare system that's got about 8 or 9 hospitals, and probably about 20,000 employees. And then we do a lot of tourism and hospitality work as well. Louisiana Office Tourism is a client, and so forth. So my background is media planning and buying. So the bulk, a good chunk of what we do as an agency is media planning and buying. Although in the legal space, we do a fair amount of creative as well. And I think over the last couple of years, the conversation has changed, rightfully so, and we're trying to change it even more around away from media terminology, clicks or impressions and stuff, and shifting the conversation more towards outcome based, and those things that CFOs and business owners really want to hear about: income and sales and revenue. So. We use media to be a multiplier of revenue, and a lot of the work that we do is around that decision moment when people actually decide on who they're going to hire, what products or services they're going to want to use.
Well, and I love that you guys are taking a step away from all of the jargon, because anybody who isn't in that media space, who isn't integrally involved in the buying process or in social media, y- the impressions really don't mean a whole lot. For an attorney, what means something to them is whether or not their phone is ringing and whether or not there are leads coming in and qualified leads coming in. So having those metrics that actually make sense for their business is fantastic. And clearly, if you've been around for the past 30 years, you have seen a lot of evolution in what the space itself looks like, because we're no longer just you have cable, you have uh, you know, maybe internet advertising in its infancy. But what have you seen in the evolution, and where are the biggest outlets now that you are steering the ball firms towards?
You know, when people ask me about my job, my career, I tell them I feel like I got in at the right time. I got in the mid '90s, a little earlier than mid '90s, and and I'm also, I'm older ish, so I also understand, and I can relate to when we did not have cable as a thing. But then my career, started right when the internet was coming on. And so I've seen it and experienced it all, the internet coming on, um, and social media and all those things. And so the conversation has dramatically changed. And I think nowadays, to your point, it's great that, the language we're using is different, because ad agencies, marketing world have a tendency to overcomplicate things and use fancy words and titles and so forth. And
We love our
it,
acronyms, don't we? Uh,
you yeah, I could go on an entire podcast just about that. But the thing that's, just we see the big shift these days is just that is, and especially with AI nowadays, because that has shown a brighter light on the let's do more with less kind of mentality. And so doing more with less in our world, look, at the end of the day, we're running ads. Okay. We're running media, so to speak, but doing more with less is how do we generate more revenue? How do we make the phone call with qualified cases, A cases? Um, it's that. And so the conversation absolutely has changed, and clients, regardless of the industries, has shifted towards, you know, how is this impacting my brand? How is this impacting my revenue, my income, or my staff, with my attorneys staying busy? We have the call volume to the case volume that we need to grow to hit our goals. And, we put together a little checklist recently that we're gonna, post up on social media. And one of them checklists is how does it and it's a checklist against media opportunities. And it's how does this support my growth goal? And it's not, do I get enough clicks out of it? It's not that kind of checklist, but it's a does this help me implement my strategy? And does this help me grow my company? And that's really what's happened lately, is that this industry, the legal marketing industry, law firms have caught up to what we should be thinking about. They've gotten more sophisticated. And that's a great thing, honestly. And everybody in the digital world, we were running ads and reach and frequency. They mean nothing. And I tell my team all the time, the leadership, the owners of the firm really just want to know what's the impact it's making on what's the bottom line impact.
And that, at the end of the day, is all that matters. But I think one of the big things that you touched on there was that, does this align with my goals? And I think that's an important question that attorneys need to start by making sure that they understand their own goals. And it can't just be, I want more cases, and it needs to have some data behind it. Of, are your goals realistic? What are they? And what exactly do you need to be doing in your advertising journey to achieve those goals? So there needs to be a little bit of planning on that front end. And of course, that's going to look different for every law firm out there. So, Eric, when you are working with a law firm that hasn't run ads before, let's say that they've tried a few other marketing initiatives, but they are new to the ad buying space and they aren't quite sure what to invest in, what types of questions do you ask them to get an understanding of their goals so that you can guide them to making the right investment?
So if they haven't done advertising, or it's been a while, or they haven't had any success, we'll do a couple of things. One, we do this brand realization program of who they are, what they stand for, and why does that even matter? Because those are the kind of things that help us build an underlying strategic foundation about why does it even matter to people. Are you just going to yell and scream the same thing that everybody else is talking about? Um, but with that new client relationship, we also ask for a lot of data, honestly. And this is a two-way relationship. And I said, look, in order for us to do our job, you've got to provide us a bunch of information. And the data is, because back to the goals, the data is, what are your goals? How many cases are you taking in? What is the cost per case? What does that acquisition look like? What does that conversion look like? So that way we can understand, are they even where they need to be? Because we've had a client before where they were excited and they were converting, X percent. And Renee, who's, a key person on our team here, her and I were looking at each other like, "Ryan, how much? What did she just say?" And we told them, and we got under the hood, and we're like, "You are leaving so much on the table, because your conversion needs to be 25, 35% or greater." Um, and and so the basic conversations, the initial conversations, are around that. What are you doing now? How'd you get here? What does it cost to get here? And then what does the future look like? Because sometimes there's a little bit of reeling people in. You're like, I want to grow this, and I want to be here. And it's like, but you're only bringing in 10 cases a month. And by the end of 2026, you want to be bringing in 250. That's a massive jump. And I'm exaggerating here. But,
Right.
you know, if they give me that spread that they want to do, then I start going, all right, what's your capacity? How long, all that stuff. Can you realistically, because the last thing we want to do is turn, we build the business model from a marketing standpoint and turn it on because we've got it humming along. The last thing we want to do is turn it on, and then the firm can't support the new client volume, and then they end up actually doing damage,
Yeah.
because they're putting people away, they're not responding to phone calls, they're not, handling the cases in a timely manner. And then when you think about that scenario, you're actually paying money to get people in the door so you can damage your brand. And yeah, so there's definitely some, some slow steps that we want to take. I mean, I know everybody wants to go, I want to start now. It's Friday. Can we get this rolling on Monday? And I'm like, we probably need to do a little bit of housekeeping, have some
Right.
conversation.
If you're not prepared to take on that caseload, if your intake team
Yeah.
isn't converting, all of those pieces need to be in place before you can add more fuel to the
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah, and look, we move, the conversation moves quickly, the work moves quickly as it should, but we just want to make sure that, look, you know, all these things, cars get, road tested, ships get road tested, airplanes get tested before they go out. It's like, let's do a little road testing on this and see where's a weak link, what's going to break first, and then, are we prepared to fix it? So,
And that's a great point. And so you make sure that everybody has the system in place to support the growth that's going to hopefully come out of these advertising initiatives. And you get your testing done, you figure out what is going to resonate with their target market. And then let's say you have that law firm, they go out, they do a big push, and it doesn't yield the results that they want. What's the next step there? And I mean, I'm not specifically talking about you guys because I know you guys are gonna hit a home run every time, but I know that there are attorneys out there that have been in this situation. What should they be evaluating and at what benchmarks to see what's successful, and how should they be prepared to pivot?
so the key thing is, one, we don't hit it out the park every time, and we're upfront. It's, nothing in life is guaranteed, but fortunately, we have, the industry instincts and the history that says this is, these are the best practices. These are the things that work in certain situations. And these are things that don't work in certain situations. But to your point is, if things aren't working, one, you know, what I heard you say, I'm like, great, you've got points of measurement. You've got things to allow you to measure that it's not working. And that's like critical because because if you can measure what's not working, you can also measure what's working. And then you start just whittling things away. And look, there's a ton of conversation about attribution, about, last click and last touch and all that stuff. And those are super relevant, you know, but having the system in place that allows you to do that, and monitor that, then allows you on, on a weekly basis to go, how was last week? What performed well? What didn't perform well? And getting that formula and, look, we're Roux Advertising. There's a lot of reasons we picked the word Roux. If you know anything about Southern cooking and Creole and Cajun cooking, is that, you're gonna have to try a few things and test a few things. Fortunately, history is on your side and there's proven things, but every market is a little different. Every law firm is a little different. Every competitive set is a little different. Everybody stands for something different, hopefully, should be standing for something different. And so there is a little trial and error to it. And so we do, trim the fat as quickly as possible, and then double down on the things that work. But, we are in those initial conversations. We are building what that reporting mechanism looks like as part of the overall system. So that way we can say, what is your call volume? What's coming in? What's converting? I want to talk to the people in the intake team because I want to hear firsthand. I don't want to just read a report, but I want to hear the sentiment. I want to hear what's going on with the people who are coming through the door and going on with the people who are that the client or law firm is turning away. I want to
Right.
see where things aren't quite connecting. And so that's always beautiful. And we have clients that, send us recordings of calls, and that's great. We have clients that send us, you know, reports every Monday to say this is what last Monday through Sunday looked like. So there is an enormous amount of energy put towards studying what's working and not working. And look, we're looking for ultimately, cost per case, volume of cases, the value of cases, those kinds of things. There honestly are some leading indicators, and it is, site traffic, phone calls, things like that, that are kind of like foundational because you need the site traffic, you need the phone calls to get the cases. And so we are looking at those things, to a degree, and our digital team or our TV buyers are looking at those. But ultimately, when we're having conversations with the managing partner, we are talking about what's the quality of cases, how many cases came through the door, what's working, what's not working. And then from a marketing standpoint, getting that feedback, we are able to then look at it and go, okay, we know exactly what the fix is. So let's shift this and move this, and let's put this kind of creative in. Let's change this media tactic or audience, and then we constantly experiment with it to get the dead weight out and just double down on more of the things that are working.
Well, and so much of this, yeah, just to kind of echo what you've been saying, is that it doesn't work in isolation. Yeah, there's no just magic on switch where, hey, Eric, I want a TV commercial. And
Hmm.
then you click on the TV commercial and hey, here are cases coming in. No, there's so much that you have to look at both before you even get started, as well as being able to look at the metrics what as you're working the process, because even the ad doesn't work in isolation. There is that problem of attribution, because it's really, somewhat easy to tell where that last touch was, but there's so much that goes into it across all of your marketing platforms that influence your prospective client and are the reason that they have come to you. So you have to look at so much of this as a network, as opposed to just as a one-time fee of here's my advertising budget.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a work in progress, and there's so many of these elements that impact how the system works. And look, we don't do everything. We don't provide a lot of things. Services. We're not interested in building websites. We're not interested in doing SEO work, that kind of stuff. We're an ad agency built for law firms and we run media campaigns and ad campaigns. But we realize the value of that. Look, my background is media planning and buying. I will be the first one to say, creative matters, and um, because those two things have to work perfectly together. And so, we're the first ones to say what's going to work, what's not going to work, or hey, look, what you really need is more public relations, and we don't do PR, but here's somebody that can do it. What you really need to do is community events, and that's something we can help you with, but it's really boots on the ground, so it's probably your team that's going to be doing all the community events and shaking hands and being at the parade or being at the barbecue or whatever. But yeah, it's a big view, and fortunately, I think our experience over the years has allowed us to be able to see the big view and have conversations about the big view, where we're, providing insight and providing some recommendations, but we don't do some of those things. But we will say, look, it's important. You got to work on this thing and you should go get somebody. Here's why it's important. Here's what you really need. Here's what it's going to do from you in the outcome. And I think if you pick one or two of these, and I might throw up some recommended names and go, I think these two groups would be perfect for you to go talk to.
Well, and that's one of the things I love about PILMMA is it brings so many of us together where we meet people we know face to face, we know them face to face, and I can bring those recommendations. If I have an attorney that I work with that is looking for an advertiser, I'm like, man, Eric really knows his stuff. He's been in the business forever. And we are able to make those introductions, and we're able to listen to attorneys and hear what has worked for them and hear their stories of things that are working differently in different areas of the country, because every market is going to be a little bit different. It's going to respond differently to different types of advertising. Every law firm, all of their branding, you learn so much by being in this space together and being able to have these conversations. So I know that that's something that I'm very much looking forward to about PILMMA this year. And so my last question for you today, Eric, is what are you looking forward to most about PILMMA?
I do think it's a lot of what you just touched on. I love catching up with everybody, and seeing everybody because I do feel like the community there is so supportive of each other. But also, I do get a lot from the conference itself, from the speakers and so forth. So, I go to these conferences, I get invigorated. Sometimes my team hates it when I go because I come back with a bunch of ideas and like, okay, we're gonna do all these things, and like, whoa, whoa. But no, it's that, you just kind of get a charge out of it, honestly. And there's so many things going on in our industry. And again, I started in the mid early 90s, and before really the internet was taking off, at least in my world. And here we are, we're knee deep in digital and internet and all that stuff. And so every day is a new day in our industry, and that's what I love about it. And so I go to the conference and I get to talk to people who are on the front lines as well, and they share some information. And so I learned a lot of information from it.
It's hard to not come away from PILMMA inspired and ready to do 12,000 new projects in the next 12
Yeah.
months. So
They cringe a little bit, but then they know how to control me. And
you gotta reel it back
we
in,
then
reel it
pick
back
the two or
in.
three really important things to tackle for the next quarter.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Eric, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. That's going to wrap up this episode of the Personal Injury Marketing Minute. Be sure to like and subscribe and do all of those things you're supposed to do with podcasts so that you don't miss out on our next episode from our Spotlight on PILMMA series. If you want to learn more about advertising and media buying, please reach out to Eric at
RouxAdvertising.com or Eric at Roux Advertising. And I'm on all the usual social media platforms.
And if you're a personal injury law firm that is looking to grow and get more cases through SEO and all things Google, reach out to me at lindsey@optimizemyfirm.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Eric, thank you again for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Lindsay. I had a blast. It was fun.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.